everyone. So Sue Hellmann is indeed an old friend of fortune, a longtime friend of fortune, not an old friend, a longtime friend. And she's had a really cool career, and Jen just told you part of it, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more really quickly. Sue is a cancer doctor, and she spent 2 years in Uganda with her husband, who's an HIV specialist, in her very early career. And then she went to Bristol Myers Squibb, and she was recruited to Genentech when Genentech was a very small company. Was that 1995?
1995.
And they were not in the cancer drug business at all. And they brought Sue on board to develop those drugs and became, of course, a big leader in anti-cancer drug development. Then Sue went to become the chancellor, first woman chancellor at UCSF, where you may not realize what a big job that was. She was in charge of 23,000 employees. And then Melinda Gates met her a couple of years ago and was dazzled by her and recruited her to become CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And actually, on your first week on the job last May, a year ago, over a year and a half ago, I came and interviewed you and Melinda, which was very cool. So
it was fun. Patty showed up, and one of the most fun things about that interview was that Patty, as she does, started asking Melinda about the recruitment process. And I had no idea about half of the things that Melinda shared with Patty were unknown to me. Melinda's like, well, Bill and I went back and we said, are we going to get her? It was actually really fun for me.
And you played hard to get.
I didn't play hard to get. I had a great job that I was happy with.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I wasn't playing.
And
I was hard to get.
And lesson learned there, right? That made you all the more desirable to them. She pretty much admitted that.
I like to tell people I don't have a cagey gene. I just don't. I'm not that poker face. So I was all in at UCSF. You know, we're doing important things. So, but it was really fun to hear the backside of the story, as you being the great interviewer you are, brought out of Melinda.
So Sue, I went through that career path because I'd like you to explain what are the common themes there.
Yeah, I often, we had these wonderful young women last night, the mentees, that was the highlight of the evening, and I often serve as a mentor. And so I've thought a lot about career advice, given how fortunate I've been in my career. I do think there's two common themes for me. I'm not that planful. I'd love to say I've been that planful, but the two common themes, one is purpose. Each of the roles I've been in as a leader, specifically really starting at Genentech and then UCSF and the Gates Foundation, it's important to me, and it's such an important part of how I lead and how I want to show up, that there's a purpose I strongly believe in and I'm passionate about. And that as a leader, I can look to my colleagues and others that we're part of something special. I often feel like we're part of history, and I just love that feeling, that something will be created that wasn't possible before we made our big efforts. And all of the roles I've played, I feel like that. I feel like history will record that we created something special as a result of our efforts, so we better do a great job. And I love that sense of urgency and commitment. But the other thing is scale. I have many colleagues who, when Roche bought Genentech, left to go to smaller companies. And I've had an opportunity so many times to think about working in places that have novel ways to approach cancer in particular, because I'm, by background, a cancer drug developer. And I'll get really excited about a product that I think will help many patients. I still have a passion for that. But the scale of a job at UCSF, a big academic medical center and graduate school, the scale of what we're trying to do at the Gates Foundation is very special to me, and I love being part of something that's so large and so ambitious. I just like that.
So the Gates Foundation is the largest philanthropic foundation in the world. What is the biggest handicap for you coming from the corporate world? And you spent, what, 4 or 5 years at UCSF?
About 5 years at UCSF.
5 years, but basically your background is corporate. What is the biggest handicap coming from the corporate world into the philanthropic world, and what helps you the most coming from the corporate world?
I would say that the biggest handicap coming from the corporate world is getting comfortable with a deep understanding of the pace that sometimes is necessary to bring others along with you. We often work where there are non-governmental organizations, UN agencies, collaborators, partners, extremely important communities, sovereign nations. And so the scale and scope of our partnerships means that one has to listen a lot, one has to change your mind, be responsive. And so I think at its finest, great corporate entities drive, they push, they cajole, they have an agenda and they're pushing. I think that's great. You can get things done with pace, and I really like pace. Mm-hmm. And so I've found myself saying to myself, my self-coaching is you can go fast and then you'll have to go slow. Mm. So making sure that pace, it allows for inclusion, allows for others to weigh in, and having many voices. So the many voices part is quite different than a corporate interaction. And in many ways, I think at the foundation, what makes me comfortable is we're there to serve. You know, we're trying to do something that hopefully will make the world a better place, but we don't have all the answers. We don't even have many of the answers. And so that sense of listening and a little more patience than may be natural,
right,
that's the biggest negative, and where I've had to do a lot of self-coaching. The biggest positive is great for the way Bill and Melinda run the foundation, which is metrics, accountability. I actually, and people here probably would laugh about it, I miss quarterly earnings. That's
wow.
Probably a bad sign about me. But you know, I actually liked when I got my report card in school. I'm kind of a report card kid. You know, if you tell me get something done and you give me a scorecard, you know, I'm going to get an A, seriously. And so I like, and this, it is spectacular, truly spectacular that Bill and Melinda and Warren, and really others in the area of global health, global development, and philanthropy have brought metrics and accountability to what we do.
Are you bringing more metrics and accountability into the foundation?
So I would say that it would be nearly impossible to bring more. I mean, we are absolutely all over numbers and accountability. What I think is a great asset, having come from the corporate world, is how much that appeals to me and how naturally. I'll give you an example. We have a malaria strategy to eradicate malaria. And this strategy intends to put the world in a position so that between 2035 and 2040, we could literally eradicate malaria that causes nearly 600,000 deaths a year. I mean, this is a very important problem, especially in poor countries. So something that has a goal that's 2035, you know, how do you know that you're doing a good job? So I naturally think about, what are the milestones? What are we going to get done this year? What happens tomorrow? And then 5 years from now, what will tell us that our theory of change and our pace are on track or not, and we need to adjust. So for me, that is not just acceptable to have metrics, because many who have dealt with development in global health for a long time say, okay, I can deal with that. From where I come from, I not only can deal with that, I embrace it, and I can use that as a manager and a leader to have the right kind of conversations about what I care about most of all, which is getting things done.
We talked about the mission to eradicate polio and this sort of surge strategy, and there was a surge approach in Nigeria last year. Is that, if you could explain that, and is that new?
Yeah, so in service of these ambitious goals, the polio program looked intently, and the polio program is a collaboration with WHO and UNICEF and Rotary. So when people read about polio, it is a massive global effort, and it has been a giant passion and focus for our foundation. In looking at the 3 countries on Earth 2 years ago that were still had what we call endemic polio. So an outbreak can occur here and there in the world, but endemic polio is that country's stuck. They've got polio, and it keeps arising as a threat to their population. The 3 left on Earth: Nigeria, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And you think, all right, those are the 3 countries remaining for a reason. Very, very hard, and the unrest and civil unrest has been a big problem. And you have 2 continents. It feels overwhelming. So my colleague Chris Elias and others who were deeply involved in this work made a decision with others in the polio effort. Let's really focus on Nigeria. The surge in Nigeria was, if we can eradicate polio in Nigeria, 2 great things will happen. The entire continent of Africa will be safer from polio. Kids will be protected from this terrible, debilitating disease. And we can then turn our attention to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and wipe out polio there. And so the great news was, and this was just celebrated in recent months, Nigeria has now gone 1 full year without polio, without an endemic case.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's 2 other things that I think are really important. One is we're not putting on the party hats. I mean, it takes 3 years to be officially confident that you're rid of polio, because it can hide in sewage systems and kind of spring back up on you. So it takes 3 years before WHO certifies a country polio-free. But the second thing is, you might say, well, gee, this is sort of an exotic disease. You should be working on health systems. There's a lot of dialogue about really building countries' ability to serve their population in ways that go beyond a one disease eradication campaign. And I learned a lot about the importance of using eradication assets and using that passion and drive to get rid of a disease when Ebola happened in West Africa. So we all read about Ebola because a few cases happened in the US, but it devastated West Africa. And one of the scariest moments in that outbreak of Ebola was when someone went to Nigeria, to Lagos, a major international city, with Ebola. Within 24 hours, the Polio Emergency Operations Center in Nigeria was turned into an Ebola Emergency Operations Center. Those assets, those trained people, that infrastructure, that ability to understand what an epidemic is, and to do contact tracing and all of the things they needed to do, immediately stamped out Ebola. And so the total number of deaths in Nigeria was 19. If you worried about Ebola or followed it, people like me weren't sleeping at night specifically because of Nigeria. And so when I visited Nigeria this summer, I talked to the folks in the Polio Emergency Operations Center. The best thing for me was how much pride they took in their capabilities, their leadership, and that they knew they had helped the entire globe dodge that bullet of Ebola outbreak in Nigeria, which would have been tremendously, the Ebola outbreak is tremendously sad and difficult for the countries affected, but the scope of it would have been so much worse. And so those those
the other
trained
lesson
people
there-
are an asset, you know?
The other lesson there, yes, is be
Yeah.
flexible. Be flexible
Yeah.
with your purpose and your people.
Well, you know, I think that that is one of the things, that's the listening part. And it's so different than a company. You know, there's a couple things that are really interesting. So when I had a portfolio at Genentech, I could say, well, gee, this year we are going to get Herceptin approved. And, you know, that blindness remedy, that's going to have to wait a little bit. We'll make sure it keeps going, but it's going to get fewer resources, so Herceptin gets approved. And there could be projects that just don't compete well in that portfolio. I'm going to work on malaria. If it gets hard in 2 years, we're going to figure out how to overcome those obstacles. I'm not going to kill the malaria project, you know, like in a company you might do. But the flexibility to respond to what the world needs from you is, you know, we have to look at what the latest hardship is that's causing suffering and death. That's our North Star, is inequality and things that cause suffering and death. And I have to say, managing our portfolio that way, the most difficult things, the hardest things are always on your plate, so it can feel overwhelming, but it's also a wonderful thing. I mean, what better metric than what's causing the most grief in the world?
I mean, that is a stark difference. We are going to invest in the world's most difficult problems that may not have a return on invested capital for 100 years.
Absolutely.
Right? That's a different mindset than at a public company.
Your shareholders would probably go run away if you did that at a public company, and yet I think that's where the metrics and the pace and the passion. So the fact that it may take a long time, or that the problems are difficult, and that our intentions are ambitious, is no excuse. And that's what I give great credit, because, you know, I've been there a year and a half, but I'm all in, because the willingness of Bill and Melinda to put themselves out there with these kinds of bets, where on any given day you don't exactly look like a genius. You know, there's setbacks, things are difficult, people are saying, wow, are you sure? And that sense of purpose, that the world will be better off as a result of our efforts, that is a steady constant in the foundation.
Who has a question?
Hi. So the development
Julie,
goals.
if you could identify yourself.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Julie Smolansky with Lifeway Foods, and I work with the UN Foundation Global Entrepreneurs Council as well. So the global goals just came out, and how can we, as leaders of different industries, support those goals?
Well, thanks for asking that question. So the UN ratified the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, that are now going to be the guidance for the world of our goals in the next 15 years. I would recommend that leaders in this room read the Sustainable Development Goals. There are many of them. And the positive of the fact that there are many of them is, I think each of you can see in your daily efforts, specifically in your companies, things that you can do to contribute to those goals. They range from climate change to decreasing maternal mortality. We're obviously very interested in the health goals. Further decreases in under 5 mortality. But they also have to do with things like water, nutrition, food security. There are many, many goals, and they are very inspiring. And the next step is breaking those goals down into really clear metrics and areas where you can see your company, and most importantly, your employees have a passion for those. So I think that for something I'm also passionate about, which is public-private partnerships, the SDGs give us great substrate for collaborations where companies can both do good business and do good for the world.
Oh, we have lots of questions now. Okay, yes, here.
Micho Spring with Weber Shandwick. We heard yesterday from Secretary Pritzker about the efforts the administration's making to help open up Cuba. Do you have any plans to engage?
We do not have plans to engage in Cuba right now. And it's one of the things where because the way we talk about it is all lives have equal value, but because our focus is so much on inequality, we tend to focus very much on the areas of the world where the largest number of people in poverty live. So currently we have a major focus in India. In the 2 North Indian states we work, there are 300 million people who live in deep poverty. I mean, that scale is very important. And in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria and Ethiopia are very much focus countries for us. So we may have programs that are global, but our very specific focus is on countries with the largest number of people struggling with poverty.
Is the Gates Foundation investing in cancer research at all?
The Gates Foundation doesn't do non-communicable diseases like cancer. The one area where we do have investments is cervical cancer prevention. We love vaccines. If you want an ROI, vaccines are a great return on investment, and they're prevention. So the HPV vaccine, the human papillomavirus vaccine, can prevent cervical cancer, which causes much suffering and death, especially in poor countries. And so that is a part of our portfolio, but otherwise not doing cancer at the Gates Foundation.
Okay. Yes, back here.
Hi, I'm Elise Nelson, President and CEO of Vital Voices Global Partnership. We work with women leaders around the world. And just building on what Julie said, one of the things that was particularly heartening for me, having worked on these issues for so long, being at the UN when the SDGs were being ratified, is that from place to place, leader to leader, everyone was saying that if we want to achieve all these 17 goals, that women and girls will be absolutely critical across all of them. There is a goal specifically for women and girls, but all the 17 quite critical. But if we look around the world, really only 8% of global development dollars are being spent to invest in women and girls, which is kind of scary if we think about women being the silver bullet, as everybody's talking about. So I'm wondering, because I know this is of great interest to Melinda, what the Gates Foundation is going to do, considering this evidence that we now have, to ramp up investments in women and girls to actually achieve the SDGs.
Well, as you mentioned, Melinda is a wonderful spokesperson for issues around women and girls, but more importantly, she wants to get things done and improve the agency and the opportunities for women and girls. So very specifically, as we've been talking about, we have strategies in everything from polio to malaria to nutrition, family planning, very important to us, agriculture. So what we're doing at the foundation is literally looking at every single one of our strategies and pushing ourselves to ask, if we take the look with a lens of maximizing the opportunities for women and girls, how do we think about that? So smallholder farmers, are we really putting women in a position where she can not only grow the crops that feed her family, but make some extra cash? Does she have a market? Is she able to use the farmers' cooperative and learn about seeds and fertilizer and soil like her neighbor who's a man? So every one of our strategy, we're asking the very question you're putting forward, which is, if you specifically target women and girls as a part of your strategy, we believe that we'll get much better bang for our buck, again, a better return on investment, and those dollars that those women make will be spent on her family, education, and health. So that is absolutely a part of our business process internally at the foundation.
Sue, we are out of time, and one thing I wanted to ask you is, and I'm not going to let you answer, is what you have learned from being on the Procter & Gamble board and the Facebook board. And what I am going to invite you to do is come back next year and be in a board session and give us your answer then. So
Great.
Thank you very much for
Thanks,
this year.
Patty. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's great.